Thank you for coming out to our town hall tonight. Before we get started, I just want to encourage everybody, if you didn't do so on your way in, try to do so on your way out, but to sign in, if you give us your email address and your phone number, what we'll try to do is continue to give you updates on recycling and other pertinent information regarding sanitation moving forward. At the front desk, if you didn't see it, we have copies of the presentation that we're going to be showing here tonight. So we have copies of these if you want to follow along or you want to take those home. We also had some copies of some articles that have been printed about recycling both locally and nationally. We also had a copy of, this is probably one of the best things that I've seen yet. This was a white paper that was put out by the National League of Cities that talks about the economic change to recycling globally. So this is a couple months old, but it's still some of the best information that I've seen yet. For those of you that haven't been here a lot, the bathrooms, if you want to use those, are back in the lobby. There's also a coat check. We have refreshments, so certainly please help yourself. There's also another event happening here at City Hall in the ballrooms just around the corner. They're doing some training for our election workers, so you may see some people coming and going, and that's okay. And we've encouraged them to join us when they finish up their work as well. And also tonight's event is being televised. We're recording it. The cameras here are directly in front of me, so if you do need to come and go, if you can kind of go to the sides and stay out of the way of the cameras, it'll make for a better presentation for those people that are watching at home. We are going to televise this on the City of Westland's cable station, WLND, hopefully starting tomorrow night, and it will be available to view on the city's YouTube page tomorrow as well. I have to apologize if my voice sounds a little scratchy. I've been fighting a cold, and I feel a lot better than my voice sounds, so I'm looking forward to tonight's meeting. So with that, we're going to start off, whenever we do a town hall meeting, we like to start off with a Pledge of Allegiance. So hopefully you'll stand up, and our Parks and Rec Director, Kyle Mulligan, has volunteered to lead us in the pledge tonight. Kyle?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'm going to stand up, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk around. So don't let that distract you. I'm going to kind of stay on my feet and try to keep tonight's meeting going smoothly as we can and try to answer as many questions as we can. Before we get started, we have a panel up here tonight, and they're all going to be participating in the presentation. And tonight we're going to go through a presentation, and then at the end we're going to have lots of time for question and answering period. So to my left at the far end is the City of Westland's Finance Director, Steve Smith. To my left is the City Attorney, Mr. Jim Fasson. To the right is the City of Westland's Director. He's the contractor that does the sanitation work for the City of Westland Midwest Recycling, Paul Ruthenberg. And to his right is Mike Logan. And Mike, can you, this is the name of your company, I'm supposed to write that down.
Michigan Consulting and Environmental.
Michigan Consulting and Environmental. So with that said, tonight we're going to start off tonight. This is a town hall meeting, and we're going to talk about recycling, but we're also going to talk, at some point we're going to put that aside, and we're going to talk about the City of Westland Sanitation Fund. At the end of the day, one of the reasons the city had to quit recycling was it was a financial decision. So we're going to do a deep dive into that sanitation fund so that everybody can understand exactly what the financial situation is, because as you guys know, coming up on the March ballot, there's a ballot initiative to raise funds for the sanitation fund. So tonight, we got to be very clear is that this is an informational meeting. We're not going to ask you to vote yes or no on the ballot initiative. We're trying to be transparent and share as much information as we can. And hopefully, when you leave here tonight, we can answer as many questions as we can so that you can make an educated decision. If we we're going to try our best to answer every question. If there's some question that we don't have the information for tonight, Shannon from the mayor's office, my secretary Shannon, is here tonight, and she's got a sheet with her with names and phone numbers and any information that we can't get, so we can get it back to you in a timely fashion. So with that, we're going to start off with City Attorney Mr. Fausone. He's going to kind of talk about exactly what the parameters that we can talk in tonight's meeting about.
Good evening. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the city attorney, and I'm going to give to you some guidelines on millage campaign initiatives to sort of make it clear. This is like at the Oscars, right? They start with all the legal discussion, and that's the boring stuff. So it'll get more interesting because the finance guy is going to talk next. But what the city may do in a campaign, is it may educate on factual information. And it can do that by website, it can do that by written materials, it can do it on its cable show, but it's educational on factual information. It can also promote, get out and vote on March 10th, 2020. So that's another aspect of what the Campaign Finance Act allows it to do under the guidelines. And it's just not the city, it's also the city officials on what they can and can't do. The city or city officials acting in their city official capacity cannot advocate for or against the initiative. They can educate on it, they can tell you when it's up for a vote, but you're not going to hear tonight or through the city's processes advocating for or against the ballot initiative. Similarly, the city could not link itself to an advocacy website on the city website or use city resources for advocacy. That would be things like they can't mail out yes votes or no votes using their supplies, people, emails, telephone numbers, etc. With regards to city officials, because this is the same guidelines I gave forward to City Council back in December, there's been a little bit of confusion. City officials, who include the mayor, the members of the City Council, the clerk, anyone speaking on behalf of the city, they did not give up their personal opinions when they got elected. So they can express their personal opinions. They're not expressing them on behalf of the city at that point. They can advocate their views on their personal websites, whether it be social media, whether it be Facebook. If it's a city council person X's personal Facebook site, they can advocate their positions. That's different than the city maintains a Facebook or social media accounts. So the city can't advocate for or against on the city items of social media, but certainly individual council members, mayors, clerks may do that. And part of this distinction is the city website and the city Facebook is actually managed by Craig Walkenbach in this instance, who does WLND. And so that's the city's component, and that's why it can't advocate for or against. So those are the sort of the guidelines going into a town hall of what the city can and cannot talk about, whether it is in the presentation or those guidelines are applied to the question and answer period. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, I'm going to stand up here. So one of the things I probably should have done in the beginning, since Jim mentioned our elected officials, is at a town hall meeting, it's probably proper to recognize the elected officials that are in the audience. And I see members of our city council here, and our city council president, Jim Hartz, to our right, Council President Pro Tem Mike Landau, Councilwoman Andrea Rakowski, Councilman Jim Godbout, and two councilmen back here, both Mike McDermott and Councilman Peter Herzberg. So thank you for being here tonight. So the first thing I want to do before we jump into breaking down the financial numbers of the sanitation fund is just to touch on recycling, kind of give you an update. And some of this you guys are already going to know. And I really appreciate our community taking to recycling. It's something that it's probably, when I look back at my time as being mayor in the city of Westland, it is definitely one of the things I'm most proud of. You know, we tried for years and years in our community to start a recycling program, and we had a couple false starts, but when we kicked off this curbside recycling program about a decade ago, we actually did it at Westland Mall, if you remember. We kicked it off and called it cash for trash, and we had recycling points if you recycled. And that first year we took off, and we've had about an 80% participation rate. You know, every year we've recycled about 5,000 tons each year, which is, it's 1 million pounds worth of trash, and the community's done an incredible job. And I remember back when we talked about starting this program, a lot of people were nervous because we had to purchase 25,000 96-gallon containers, and it was going to be pretty expensive. And we had some members on council that were nervous that if we did it, we were afraid that people wouldn't use them. And, you know, throughout the years when you drove through the community, when you saw those blue containers out there, I mean, our community really did a great job with it. When you look, and Steve Smith is going to go into the numbers a little bit, when we started this program, you know, the city of Westland used to receive revenue for our recycling. And Steve's got a slide, I think our first 4 years, we brought in over, I think, $340,000 from recycling. And, you know, at the time it was a no-brainer. It was good financially for the city. We were really making a dent. And the economics of that changed about 4 or 5 years into the program. And you'll see how we went from, I think we made $340,000 those first 4 years to the next 5 years cost us $320,000. And even at that, it was still cheaper than landfilling. And we'll talk about those numbers. I think at the time is when we started paying $18 to recycle, but it was still about $10 less than landfilling. So, you know, fast forward, during that time, most of the recyclables were going overseas, you know, not just from Westland, but from the state of Michigan, but all across the United States and most of the world. As China's economy took off, you know, they were depending on recycling from other countries. And the markets were good, the markets were strong as China started to realize that they produced just as many recyclables as the United States. And they had infrastructure in place to recycle their own material. Things started to change. And we kind of talked about it, the National League of Cities kind of talked about it, that things were changing. And we received word from the city of Westland has always sent our recyclables to a MRF, which is a recycling facility in New Boston. We were actually one of the first communities that started taking recyclables there. We received word from, it was GFL, which bought the recycling facility. When we started dealing with them, it was actually called Re-Community. We had a contract with Re-Community where we received revenue for the recycling. We were the only city that had a direct contract with the MRF, and that's why we received the revenue. A lot of other communities at the time were still just paying their hauler to get rid of this stuff, but it had a revenue, so the haulers were making money. So Westland was in a position to make money. But after GFL purchased the recycling facility from Re-Community, we had a contract that was with Re-Community. So we approached them, and Steve was the guy that headed up the negotiations with them. We started looking at trying to enter a contract with them, and they had a lot of turnover in their management and the people that we were dealing with. But we never really came to a contract that you know, we were used to getting paid for this stuff. We could never really get comfortable with the contract where we had to pay them. So Steve negotiated with them. We went back and forth on what a floor would look like and what a ceiling would look like. And but at the end of the day, because they had so much turnover, our contract wasn't that big of an issue to them. So we had the fortunate, we just kept recycling at $18 a ton. And it was cheaper for us, so we weren't really necessarily knocking down their doors to change the number, because every time we did, our number was going to go up. So once, actually January 7th, we have a copy of the letter, as Steve got the letter from, it came to the finance department from GFL that effective February 1st, a 30-day notice that our price was going to go from $18 a ton to $80 a ton. And remember at the time, it's 28 to landfill, 18 to recycle, so it was cheaper for us. When the $80 a ton came across, when we took a look at our sanitation fund's been pretty tight for a while now. So when you looked at the $80 a ton times the 5,000 tons that we're generating, it was pretty pricey. We didn't have the ability to do that under our current sanitation fund. So we alerted the city council. We started looking for options, and you remember we had one option that that we brought forward. It was the Detroit Waste and Energy Plant in Detroit, the Detroit incinerator. We couldn't find anybody, well, there's not that many places that take your recyclables to, but we couldn't find anybody that was less than $80 a ton. The Detroit incinerator, which produced energy from trash, said that they would match the price that we were paying at the landfill, so it'd be $28. And then I think if we entered into a longer term deal, they could bring it down to 25, which would still be cheaper than recycling. So we had a study session with the city council. We talked about that. We put a team together. We went out there and we checked out their operation. So we brought it before city council, and city council voted it down. At the end of the day, it was probably the best thing to happen, because shortly thereafter, Detroit incinerator closed its doors. So we'd have been stuck once again in another situation. So with that said, we mailed out a letter to the residents. It came from me, and hopefully everybody got one back. We mailed it back in February 22nd, that explained the fact that, what had happened, and the fact that your trash or your recyclables were going to be going to the landfill until we could figure out another option for recycling. We wanted to be very transparent about it, because our plan, and we're still been doing this, and we're going to talk about this tonight to see if this is what we still want to do. But we wasn't sure at the time if it was going to be a short-term problem or a long-term problem. So what we wanted to do was ask everybody to continue their recycling behavior, continue to separate the material at the curb, and then the trucks would keep working in their regular routes, because we wasn't sure how long this was going to last. And at the same time, once, recycling is a learned behavior, and I thought we did a pretty good job as a community of everybody kind of getting used to that. So I didn't want to go back and put everybody in a position now where just throwing everything in your garbage can, and once you psychologically kind of know that it doesn't matter, we knew that was going to change. With that said, we wanted to be transparent about it, because I didn't want you to think that we were taking your recyclables to the recycling facility, if in fact that we weren't. So there was a task force that was put together at the Conference of Western Wayne. That's the 18 communities that make up Western Wayne County. We get together once a month, all the chief elected officials. Every community in the CWW region except Westland had a trash contract with GFL. They were picking up their trash at the curb and taking it to their recycling facility, except Westland. Westland has a contract with Midwest, and we've had that for a long time. GFL, we learned at this task force, had sent every one of those communities a letter saying that it was going to cost them more to recycle. So this task force got together, because a lot of these cities were under contract. They didn't like the fact that they were going to have to pay more for recycling, so they pushed back. Some communities paid extra money to continue having their stuff recycled, and some communities didn't want to pay extra money, and their stuff isn't getting recycled. Even though it looks like at the curb that they're putting it out there that it's getting recycled, not every community is. So with that said, at the task force, we shared our information that we were transparent. We mailed out a letter. Some people didn't like it. I think we mailed out the letter, and I think it was, I can't remember, Paul, who was it that lit us up? Was it was it GFL or was it Republic? Somebody didn't like the fact that we put out a letter.
I think it was GFL.
No, it was Waste Management.
I'm sorry, Waste Management.
Waste Management owns the landfill that the city takes over. It's like that we take our trash to. So Waste Management didn't like the fact that we put out this letter, but in fact, we did, and I think it was the right thing to do. So with all that said, and a lot of that stuff, a lot of you have already heard me say this, but we've continued to look for ways to recycle. And we've worked through the task force with the Conference of Western Wayne. There's interest in the 18 communities in Western Wayne, all the ones that recycle, about working together to try to create a regional MRF recycling facility that we can all put our stuff together in. There's a very successful one in Oakland County called Sacra. There's another successful one in Farmington that our resident talked about during his campaign, and he's been educating me on that, and that's something that we're taking a look at. And then there's another option that's coming online in Washtenaw County, but that looks like it might still be a couple years out before they're willing to take on any other communities. So we were $80 a ton, so we talked to City Council in the budget year. We added $200,000 to the budget to try to figure out a way to come up with a program and exist in the current year. Steve continued working with GFL. The price went from, they probably won't like we say this publicly, but it went from 80 bucks a ton to 100 bucks a ton. The next thing you know, it was 120 bucks a ton. And the last back and forth that Steve had with them, it was up to $130 a ton with a new formula that based on how clean your material is and the type of material that you could deliver, perhaps you could get a $10 rebate, which gets you back to the 120. So with that said, there's still not a real cost-effective way to do this. In the past, our mindset was that recycling was cheaper than landfilling. Moving forward, it looks like that's not going to be the case. It's going to, the community is going to have to make a decision if this is something that we want to do, and I think it is the right thing to do. There's going to be a price to do it. So at the current model that we had last seen from GFL, it's $585,000 a year, $600,000 a year. Without passing a sanitation millage, there's no way that we can do that. I want to be very clear, though, is that this isn't a recycling millage, because we're going to pivot from recycling and go into the sanitation millage, because Steve needs to understand is at the end of the day, we have to take care of our regular sanitation first, and that's picking up your trash and your compost and your bulk items. That's the most important thing. So one last thing on the recycling facility. So as we've been working with, I kept saying the recycling facility got bought by GFL. They actually got bought by Republic. So we were dealing with Republic back and forth on these prices that I talked about, the 80 bucks a ton, $100, 120, 130. That was with Republic. What's happened just recently, and Mike's the expert in this field, he could tell you exactly when it happened, but GFL bought the MRF that we take our stuff to in New Boston. So maybe that's going to be a good thing for us. Maybe it's not, because we don't have a contract with GFL to do our trash like everybody else does. And with that said, now all of a sudden the competition gets smaller and smaller. So we have not got a proposal back from the new ownership at GFL. We haven't financially been in a position to really, in good faith, negotiate with these folks. So this upcoming millage would be important for us to do that. I'd hate to sit down and negotiate with these guys if we didn't have the money to pay for it. So with that said, we're going to ask Mike. I kind of talked about where we're at locally on recycling, and I've asked Mike. Now he's coming. He's an expert in the field, and I asked him to talk about, is there anything that I missed, Mike? Anything that you're seeing? Any light at the end of the tunnel, or anything you can share with us?
Thanks, Mayor. And a little background on myself. I'm the president of Michigan Consulting and Environmental, but previous to that, I've been in the waste industry both in Michigan and New York since, actually, I can't believe it now, 30 years. Went through different layers of management with one of the national players. And in 2001, I started my own company called Synergy Environmental. We did a little bit of work with the city, but primarily commercial and industrial customers, big three. And we've been advising clients on landfill diversion tactics and practices since inception. And our green initiatives not only help the environment, maintain a positive image, and also promote a sustainable future, not only for ourselves, but for our clients as well. One of the things I'm really proud of is back in the late 2000s, the city came and asked, hey, can you help us out with our recycling drop-off center? And they had a series of roll-off containers out there. We did a real quick analysis of what was going on there and just deemed, hey, too many light loads leaving the facility too often and really losing quite a bit of money. So we ended up installing a compactor out there. And at the time, it was the first one we ever put out there, a solar-powered machine because of the lack of power out the site. And it's still in use today. So it's one of those things, back in the day, it was a financial windfall. Now with the recycling markets diminished a little bit, it's kind of been negatively affected. The mayor's always been on me to be revenue neutral at worst case scenario, and he's really looking out for your best interests all the time. The current recycling market, it's really brutal. I don't know if I've ever seen it as bad as it is right now. And you go through ebbs and flows, but right now what's happening, the residential market, and let me start off before I get into the market analysis, go into single stream recycling. Previous to like what's happening with single stream, it used to always be pre-sorted at the curb. And Paul can attest to this, how labor intensive that really is. So you package your materials in a bin, the driver came out of the truck, sorted all the different materials, put them in different bins, not compacted, really light loads, like leaving the streets and really on the streets a long time during the day. So when single stream came out, really easy for the residents, really easy for the driver. And the major difference is huge efficiencies at the street. You could pick up a lot more materials, volume really increased. The primary negative to that is contamination. And with that contamination has led to kind of some of the issues we have right now. Some examples of items that are highly recyclable would be glass. It's a highly recyclable product, but in a single stream environment, it really gets contaminated. You compact the glass in a truck, not only affects the glass and separating, brown, clear, and green, but also gets embedded in other products as well. Embedded in cardboard, embedded in plastic, embedded in paper. On a commodity value, the big thing that really happened was the mayor mentioned China. They imposed what they call a national sword policy in 2017. Not much was said except they just imposed this policy of not accepting contaminated material. They didn't really start enforcing this until 2018. And what it did is force like anybody shipping material in there to have extremely clean material. And we're talking a 0.5% contamination rate, which no processor can really attain. So really they called everybody's bluff. People still ship material there. They package all these sea containers back and ship them all back home again. And that abruptly stopped about a third of the volume going overseas. So think about all the recyclables that are like at your curb, the street. The mayor mentioned 5,000 tons. A third of the material that leaves everybody's like street or community ends up going overseas. So it's actually hard to believe we can't consume that volume here. But when you lose all that demand, the market price is going to go down. And right now, that's what situation we're in right now. And the mayor did mention this National League of Cities. There's copies out there, right?
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, that's a real good piece of information that really kind of highlights how the pricing went really off a cliff. And just say plus or minus if it was a blended rate, it was $100 a ton of value. Well, it dropped 5 times that in less than a year. So that was all in 2018. At the same time, the city of Westland was kind of ahead of the game by playing the market. They really had their own contract with the recycling plant, where all these other communities had it with the hauler. So they were financially in a windfall. And it was really a great move back then. And they're ahead of the current situation now by controlling their own destiny. Everything that's happening to the city of Westland right now is going to be happening to every community along Western Wayne County, really the whole state of Michigan. Everybody's in the same boat. it's really a tough situation. You all have a tough decision to make in regard to what you want to do. Another issue too with recycling the market too, when you have like a lack of demand, a lot of these recyclers that are accepting material right now, just say you're taking a lot of cardboard in. Well, right now they're charging for that material. So they're sitting on material, stockpiling a whole bunch. So people ask me like a crystal ball, what's going to happen? I really don't know, but my gut tells me if people are stockpiling it, there's already a lack of demand out there. I don't see how the prices could go up anytime in the near future. I want to mention too some state of Michigan benchmarks. There's some issues coming on with the state. It used to be the DEQ, now it's called EGLE. They're going to be coming out with some benchmarks with regard to what they want each county to like produce from the standpoint of landfill diversion. They have a target by 2025 to get near 50% recycling. So what they mean is diversion from landfill. So add your compost and your recycling, divide that by the total amount of tons. They want that to be 50% in 5 years. Right now, we're just under 20%. So we have a long way to go. So they have like other like benchmarks that they want each community to kind of hit. The other benchmark that they want hit, and this is just in a couple of years, they want 90% of the single-family homes in urban areas to have access to curbside recycling. The only issue I have with the state right now is like how they're going to enforce all this, but those are benchmarks that are like been published already. The state of Michigan and the Michigan Recycling Coalition is recommending not to eliminate commodities because it's very difficult to add those items back to the recycling mix. I think the city's also done a good job with regard to, like, even though the materials aren't going to recycling plant now, by continuing to keep the repetitive behavior going in regard to recycling at the curb, you're really in a great position when you start back up again on recycling that it's like clockwork, you've already been doing it. So there's no retraining, no re-education. That's a quick snapshot. I'll be available for questions later on too. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mike. And Mike had mentioned our drop-off center at Marquette. For those of you who remember when we kicked off our program, the curbside recycling was phase one. Our planned phase two was going to be the multifamily, the condos, the apartment complexes, and phase three was going to be the businesses. There wasn't really a good way to do either one of those, so that's where we came up with creating the drop-off site, making it single stream, and that's what we've been doing. So that way people that lived in multifamilies could still have the opportunity to recycle, and businesses also had a chance to bring stuff there. We are still under a contract until the end of this year, the end of the calendar year or the end of the fiscal year, Steve?
It was the calendar year, but it's been, we're back on with the contract, so.
Okay, so the stuff at the drop-off center is still currently going to the recycling facility, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And how long is the contract is through the end of the calendar year, or?
Well, the contract right now, it has it has a month-to-month feature on it, so it'll go until the city cancels it.
All right, so they're still accepting it under the
Yes.
existing contract. All right, so the stuff at the recycling facility is still being recycled. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of pivot away from recycling for a little bit, because I know that at the end of the day that's something we want to do. But I want to pivot now to the sanitation fund. And as you know, there's going to be a ballot question coming up asking for a levy on the sanitation millage. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our city attorney, Jim Fostone, who's going to talk about the language and what the ballot's going to look like.
So you have up on the screen, and will be on the slides that you have in front of you, as well as ultimately on the website, the actual ballot language that you will see. This is ballot language that council adopted in mid-December of 2019. It then runs by the clerk and runs by the Wayne County and ends up on the ballot. I'm gonna read it, maybe not verbatim because it's up there and there's only so much legal boring stuff you can take. But the question asked is, shall the city of Westland levy a new millage of up to 1 mil against all taxable property for a 10-year period, beginning with the tax year 2020 and ending with tax year 2029 inclusive, for the purpose of funding recycling and garbage services, including but not limited to recycling, bulk pickup disposal, yard waste collection, composting, and trash pickup disposal. And then it explains what a mill equates to in taxable value, and says that rate, which rate shall be assessed without further reduction by Section 31 of Article 9, State Constitution of 1963, and without further annual vote by the electorate. If approved, the full millage will raise approximately $1,750,000 the first year it is levied. Now, you've read these before and said, who the heck wrote that thing? Yep. I have to admit, I wrote it. So there's a couple of things you have to do in writing these is to try to be clear about what it is you're funding, how much that mill will collect, and the amount it will raise approximately in the first year. So a number of these things are formula, and you probably have seen them in other such millages. We also wanted to make clear, as the council did, that for purposes of funding, it was not just recycling, but it's garbage services. It's what we refer to in the city as sanitation. It's broader than just recycling, and Steve will explain some of that later in the numbers, but it includes bulk pickup, which had been an issue for residents, yard waste collection, composting, and trash pickup and disposal. So the millage could be applied to all of those things. The language, which sounds very lawyerly about without further reduction by Section 31 of Article 9, is relative to for the 10-year period, there would not be a rollback in the new millage of up to 1 mil. So annually, the city council would set the millage, and that would be the millage that would be set for that collection period. What we wanted to also give you then on the next part of the slide deck is the actual ballot language, how this will look, because it's one thing to see it in sort of typed up in bigger font, but this is what it'll look like when it shows up either on your AV ballot or your hard ballot. I want to thank the clerk for making this available to us. And this is a ballot question where yes means yes and no means no. If you will, yes means you're for it, no means you're against it. And that's the language that will actually show up on how you're voting in March. So you can see the language itself on the one page, and then, as I say, the sample of the ballot initiative on the second page. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mayor or Mr. Smith.
All right, thank you, Jim. So I know what you're thinking, don't we already have a sanitation millage? So Jim explained the language on the proposed levy, but Steve Smith now is going to talk about the existing sanitation millage and also give you the history of it so you can see kind of where we're at here today. Then after Steve finishes up with the history of that millage, I'm going to ask Paul Ruthenberg to stand up and talk about the operations, what he's doing right now and how we're doing it. Then we're going to come back to Steve to actually go into the numbers of the sanitation fund if the millage does not pass and if the millage passes. So with Steve, you want to talk about the history of the current millage?
Thank you, Mayor. So before I start talking about the history and the timeline of events that relate to the sanitation fund, I just want to be clear that throughout the presentation, we're going to use words like sanitation and refuse. For this discussion, they'll be used interchangeably. They'll mean the same thing. Also, when we talk about the sanitation fund or the sanitation department, that means the same thing. We're talking about the same thing there. So I know in different slides, we reference it in a different way. So, but to start with the events history. So back in fiscal year 68, 69, which obviously was a long time ago, the city started to assess the Public Act 298 of 1917. This allows cities, township, villages to levy up to 3 mills for garbage collection and disposal. So that's the beginning of the millage. So fiscal years ending 1986 to 201, there was an additional millage passed by the residents, by the vote of the people, for 15 years, and that was up to 1 mill. That happened. That one expired. Fiscal year 2003, 2004, the Central Wayne County Sanitation Incinerator closes. So that was an incinerator that there was 5 cities that belonged to that authority, which was Dearborn Heights, Inkster, Garden City, Wayne, and Westland. So I don't know if anyone remembers that incinerator. I think it was located in Dearborn Heights off Inkster Road, I believe. But that closed.
Steve, was the additional sanitation millage that was approved 86 to 2001, was that for expenses related to the incinerator?
Yes, that millage was related to the Central Wayne County Sanitation Authority expenses, yes.
Okay.
So 2003, 2004, the incinerator closed. The city entered into a contract with Waste Management to take the garbage to the landfill, and that's when we started taking it to the landfill. And that was a 20-year contract. Fiscal year 2009-10, that's when the recycling program started. We, like the mayor had said, we entered into a contract for a recycle rewards program, also single stream curbside recycling, and purchased 28,000 bins for recycling. Those were the blue bins that we originally purchased. Fiscal year 2010-11, the city received $160,000 during that one fiscal year for recycling. Fiscal year 2012-13, this would be the last year that the city realizes revenue from recycling. And like the mayor had said, for those 4 years of recycling, the city had received over $375,000 in revenue during those 4 years. That went right into the sanitation fund. After that, from 2014 to 2019, the city actually paid over $325,000 for recycling. Fiscal year 2013-14, we entered into a 5-year contract for the P4 program, which was a private-public partnership program with Midwest Sanitation. We combined the recycling hauling contract, which was separate before then, with the new contract with Midwest Sanitation. And before this contract, we were paying, I think it was Republic, $700,000 to pick up the recycling. So that got pushed into the Midwest Sanitation contract. Also, that same contract, we reduced the per pickup fee that Midwest Sanitation was charging. That saved an additional $700,000. So for that program, the city saved an estimated $700,000 annually. And as part of that program, that's when the city purchased the original 7 garbage trucks. We also bonded for 28,000 garbage bins at that time. So there was that offset, not the $700,000 in savings, but so let me move up to 2014. We purchased the 7 trucks. 2015-16, this is the first year that the city actually started paying for recycling. And like the mayor had said, that started at $18 per ton, which was still cheaper than taking it to the landfill. So we did that. Fiscal year 2017-18, the contract for Midwest Sanitation was extended until June 30, 2024. And that lines up our contract with the landfill when that ends. So those 2 contracts will end that same fiscal year. Fiscal year 2018-19, city purchased 3 additional sanitation trucks. 2 of them were rear loaders and 1 was the front loader. And we brought back pickup bulk pickup for residents at no charge. Fiscal year 2018-19, recycling costs increased. That's the letter that the mayor was talking about, almost fivefold. Went from $18 a ton to $80 a ton. Recycling was suspended at that time. Letter was sent out to all the residents. But I thought this was very interesting. During the recycling program, the city recycled almost 48,000 tons of material, which is 95 million pounds of material that stayed out of the landfill. So during the current year, we were able to work with the Central Wayne County Sanitation Authority. We reduced our portion of the administrative costs. Also, during this fiscal year, the landfill costs are going to remain the same for the next 2 fiscal years, which will save additional money going forward. And for the tax year 2019, which is fiscal year 2019-20, the sanitation millage was 2.41. That appears on the summer tax bill. And right now, that's the maximum the city can levy because of the Headley rollback. So remember, it started off at 3 back in the late 60s, and now we're at 2.41 because of the Headley rollback. So it doesn't seem like a lot going from 3 mils to 2.41 mils, but when you're talking dollars, it's almost $1 million a year less that we would collect based on the difference in the millage rates. And that leads us till today, 2019-20, where we're proposing the additional millage. So.
Okay, thanks, Steve. So we thought it was important to talk about the history of the existing millage, and for some folks that have been around for a while, back in 2008 when we were talking about kicking off this curbside recycling program, there were people that were worried at the time that we were going to not have enough money to do it, that we were going to have to come back and ask for a millage. So since 2008, because as you can see, we went through a period of time where we received revenue, we were able to extend out the use of that existing millage. And then we didn't go too deep into it, but with the P4 program, that's the program where the city of Westland purchased our trucks and paid for our own gas. As a way to save money, it was actually cheaper for us to do that than to contract somebody and have them buy the trucks, add some money to it, buy the gas, add some money to it, and so on and so forth. So we've been pretty crafty throughout the years to try to make this millage go as far as we can. With that said, I'm going to now ask Paul Ruthenberg to stand up, and he's going to try to go through exactly what operations look like, what we're doing, why we're doing it, talking about the trucks that we're using, and then I'm going to ask him to give us an update on the fleet. You heard us talk about the trucks that we purchased. Some of you have probably seen trucks go through your neighborhood that did not have the City of Westland's name on their side. Those were trucks that we were renting because we did have some trucks that were out of service, and I'm going to let Paul explain that and talk about where we're at today with our trucks.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everybody. It's great to see such a large group of people here over a very important subject. Again, my name is Paul Ruthenberg. People struggle with this, but I'm really just the garbage man, so let's just simplify it, okay? Real quickly, I was thinking about, okay, so what do I do? And a lot of this that I see is, what are you doing every day, okay? Fundamentally, we have 31,260 units to service every week in the city of Westland. We need to service each unit for trash, compost, and ideally recycling, okay? We break down those numbers for what each truck, each unit can handle. Prior to the stopping of the recycling, we used 5 for trash, 2 for recycling every day, total of 7 trucks. Each truck, the 5 trash trucks, each truck is responsible for approximately 1,250 homes per day. The 2 recycling trucks, remember we recycle every other week, They're responsible for 1,563 homes per day, with the understanding that we get between 80 and 90% participation. So that's how that's broken down. We have 2 compost trucks that we roll approximately 42 weeks out of the year, and that's because we have an extended compost season that we enjoy until December 15th. We remember the snowfall that we had and the difficulty we had with getting our leaves out for collection. But, so what we do is 42 weeks out of the year, we're operating with 9 units, 2 rear load packers, 7 one-arm trucks, okay? The question that I've seen and been asked is, well, if we're not recycling, well, then why don't we just not use those trucks? Well, the fact is, the cans, the volume is still there. Each truck is capable of approximately 1,300 cans per day. If, in order to down those 2 trucks, we would have to take it a step further and say, don't put out the recycling bins either, which would be a problem with volume for the homeowner, for our customers. So please feel free to follow up with any questions that you may have during the question session. I can try to explain that better. The other thing, I was just putting some fun facts together about the equipment. Currently, the state of the equipment is that it is in good shape. We do have 2015s down here. Those 2015s are kind of like when you buy a new model car. We actually took delivery of those trucks in July of 2014. So they've been on the road since July 1st, 2014. Actually, the units are in great shape. We have had some issues. You have seen rental trucks out there. We need to make sure that the product at the curb is collected every day. As these trucks mature or age, they need more and more tender loving care. A couple fun facts. Each one of those 2014 trucks has made over 1,400,000 lifts with that arm to date. The other thing that I would love everybody to understand about my industry is the trucks are what in the garbage industry are considered extreme duty trucks. So miles don't really mean much to garbage men because we're in neighborhoods picking up, we're not on a freeway. Hours is what determines a truck. In our industry, every hour is equal to 40 miles. So respectfully, respective of what you're looking at, if you go to the 2019 auto load truck, that has, for comparative speaking, 132,000 miles on it. We could go down to another couple trucks with 11,000, 12,000 hours on them. We're talking 517,000 miles, 465,000 miles. That's what my industry deals with the equipment. That's why we've always been upfront and said, hey, the equipment outside life in the garbage industry is about 7 years. Because your car, for instance, you're not driving it, revving it up every 100 feet, driving to another stop, hitting the brakes and revving it up again. That's what garbage trucks do. They also go in and climb hills this high in mud-covered hills in landfills to tip their product. So, very quickly, the fleet's in good shape. We're proud of the shape that the fleet's in. Have we had difficulties? Yes, we have 1 unit out there that's getting some engine work, and we had an absolute catastrophe that on July 4th. And we had the pictures and the film from my yard. Fireworks came in and ignited underneath that truck, and we lost that truck. Was absolutely a horrible, horrible July 4th for me. So I'll pass it along, Mayor, and
Okay.
any questions?
So
Yeah,
before we move on, and I know that you guys are itching to ask questions, and we've only got one more portion to get through before that. But just on the trucks, I just want to touch on a couple different things. So when you look at that we put that slide back up with the fleet. When you look at those auto loads, those are the trucks that we purchased, you know, with the arms on the side to pick up the trash, and that was part of our original purchase. The city purchased those using funds out of our capital improvement fund, and we loaned the money to our sanitation fund. And we did it so that we could pay ourselves back as opposed to going out on the market and buying or financing this and paying interest to a bank. When you look at the rear load trucks, the rear load trucks are the trucks that we purchased when we decided as a community that we wanted to bring bulk pickup back. When we had gone to a limited bulk pickup with us, basically you had to call it in and it was limited and you had to pay to do it. That was a way to save money in the sanitation fund. When we were doing it that way, we were using 2 old vehicles that Midwest Sanitation still had. So when we went back to doing full-blown bulk pickup, there was definitely a cost to it. The biggest cost was buying 2 trucks, because the 2 trucks that Midwest Sanitation had, you got to be reliable. If we're gonna do this citywide, you got to have good equipment. That equipment just wasn't reliable enough, so the city purchased 2 new vehicles, and you can see they're still in service. The fleet is getting older. When we purchased it, we knew that we had the average lifespan for these garbage trucks is about 7 years. And as we start to see, as we get closer to that 7 years, that we're starting to put more money in these trucks. We did, as Paul mentioned, we had 1 truck that was down because we had to replace an engine in it. That's back in service now. We do have another truck that's off that's having engine repairs that will be back in service soon. We did have a truck, if you remember, that was in an accident on Glenwood and Hicks and Glenwood. It actually drove off the road and it avoided an accident, and fortunately nobody got hurt. But our truck, while it didn't look like it was that bad, it took actually the body shop 10 months to get this truck fixed because the cab was mangled and the frame had some issues. There was a rental vehicle that covered that truck for 10 months, and that's something that the insurance company covered our costs on that too. But when you saw those trucks out there, that was the reason why. So moving forward, you know, we're going to have to make the decision on replacing these trucks, and we've been putting some money in each budget to do it. Those auto load trucks are $300,000 trucks. So it's just one of those things we're going to have to decide how we're going to fund those as well. So at the end of the day, the fleets, we try to manage this fleet the best we can. And we have several fleets servicing the city in a lot of different areas. We look at our fire trucks, our police vehicles, our DPS vehicles, and you'll see a little bit of mixture in all those fleets as well. So the last part that we're going to have before we open this up to questions is I'm going to go back to Steve Smith. He's going to show some graphs of the numbers of the sanitation budget, what it is currently, what it would look like currently if we paid the market price for recycling, and then what it would look like with recycling with the millage was to go through. And then you guys are going to kind of like the last 2 slides I saved for you. One is because I'm like you, I know everybody's going to say we pay a lot of taxes around here. Our taxes have gone up, so we're going to talk a little bit about why your taxes have gone up, what millages were passed, and then we're going to show out of every dollar in local taxes that you guys pay where those dollars go. So, Steve?
Thank you again, Mayor. So the next few slides we'll be talking about the sanitation fund or department's budget. The first one is the current budget as it is right now. This graph shows basically 10 years. It started in 1819, goes all the way up to 28-29. So you can see in the early year, 1819, it's a narrow difference there. For the current year, it widened a little bit. We factored in a payment back to the CIP fund of $180,000 for the trucks. And then it goes up steeply in the next fiscal year, and that's we put money into a fund, 300,000, a reserve fund to purchase trucks. So that's the steep incline there. The years after that, you can see the expenditures, which is the red line, go up a little bit faster than the revenues do. And really in the revenues, there's a couple revenue line items there. There's obviously the revenues from the millage, and then we do a little bit of a refund from the Tifa and DDA district that flows back into the sanitation fund. But those are minor in comparison. So some of the assumptions that we used in creating the budgets, tax revenues, we used past history of about 1.5%. That's your taxable value on your tax bill. That's an average of what it goes up. And also, like I said, the revenues include a small refund from the TIF and DDA captures. Expenditures estimated to go up between 2 and 3%. Now, that's dependent upon the individual contracts that we have in place, also the landfill costs, and a variety of other costs. So 2 to 3% on those. And I think I noted this before. At the end of fiscal year 2024, the contract will end with Midwest Sanitation and with the landfill. So at that point, those years going further out, we just don't know at this time, because those two costs in the sanitation fund obviously are the biggest costs that we have. So up until we get closer to those years, we won't know those numbers going out. So also there's the debt payment, like I had mentioned, to the capital improvement fund. Those payments are eliminated after fiscal year 2030, which obviously this doesn't show. It only goes out 10 years. Also, the bond debt that we had for the garbage bins, that expires in 2034, so that doesn't show on this chart either. And the two beginning years, when there's not a big difference, there still shows a small deficit. So we did have some reserve sanitation fund balance that we're using to balance those first few years out. Going into the actual numbers of the budget. So I'm going to concentrate kind of on the middle column there. Now, mind you, this is without recycling, because this is the current budget, the way it stands right now. So we're looking at next fiscal year. The revenues, as you know, are from the millage. The expenditures, kind of broke them down there. The Central Wayne County Sanitation Authority, that's the landfill costs. When the garbage is picked up and dropped off at the landfill, those are the costs for there. That includes the compost, the bulk pickup, the monofill. I'm not sure if people are aware of the monofill, but that's from when we had the incinerator. There's still, that's where the ashes are, where the, after it was incinerated, that's where they are. We still have some expenses there to keep that up. So also Midwest Sanitation contract, that's the 2.2 million. The debt payments we talked about, administrative costs, operating, that's like the mayor had said, the fuel and those type of costs, repair and maintenance on the trucks, and the capital outlay for the bins. That's an ongoing cost. The bins don't last forever. They crack when it's cold out, and they need to be replaced. Some get stolen, actually. They have to be replaced. And that last one there, the reserve for truck purchase, that's the $300,000 that's put in next year's budget. And you can see at the bottom number there that's circled or squared in red. Next year, we're looking at a deficit of about $620,000. So, and that's really what this millage is all about. It's, like the mayor said, it's not a recycling millage. This is for the sanitation fund itself. So, and the other years in between, you can see at the last column, that's fiscal year 28, 29. Just for presentation purposes, all those years in between don't show, but the expenses and the revenues go up incrementally. So, for instance, at the end of fiscal year 28, 29, that year's deficit would be 980,000. So that's not a cumulative number, that's just for that one fiscal year. So the next graph there that's up there, this shows the sanitation fund with recycling. So as you can see, there's just a bigger difference between the revenues, the blue line, and the expenditures, which is the red line, and that's due to the estimated costs of recycling. So all the assumptions are the same. We put in the recycling expenditures at 4,500 tons at $130 a ton, which is the last number that we had available to us. And also the landfill costs are reduced slightly to show, instead of that recycling material going to landfill, it's actually being recycled. So there is a reduction in the landfill costs due to that. And the numbers there, basically the same, except in addition of one line item, which is the recycling at 585,000. Same thing with this, is there's a lot of years in between. We just don't show them for, you wouldn't be able to see them up there if we showed them, but for fiscal year 28, 29, if we were to do the recycling, you could see for that year, $1.5 million deficit. So the next graph talks about, it shows the budget with recycling and the additional millage. So the blue line are the revenues, red line again, the expenditures, and you can see with the millage, and this is based on 1 mill, and we use the 1 mill all the way across. Doesn't mean that's what's going to be levied. It's just for presentation purposes, we kept it consistent throughout. So you can see the blue line is ahead of the red line, which means the fund would be in balance at that point. And the last, the number slide there, the middle column for fiscal year 2021 would show a surplus of $531,000 with 1 mil being levied for the sanitation. So I think that's all I had on that, Mayor. I don't know.
Okay. All right, Steve, then we had 2 more slides we wanted to kind of break down to show you the average resident tax bill, how it's broken down, where the money goes. We've got that a couple different ways. We used a dollar bill on the first one. We have a pie chart on the second one, and then Steve's also going to lead us through some recent voter-approved millages that have had an effect on your property tax bills. And also, we're going to talk, the last thing is about the average cost to a homeowner in Westland if this millage is approved.
Thank you, Mayor. So the dollar bill that's up on the screen there, for this breaks down the resident's tax bill. So for every dollar in taxes that you pay, a majority of it goes to school-related millages, 42 cents actually. The next would be the library, that's 4 cents for every dollar. Wayne County taxes, 20 cents per dollar. And then the last one shows the sanitation is a nickel of the total tax bill. And the overall city would be 34 cents. So the city, the 34 cents would include that 5 cents as well. So that's where your dollar goes when you think about what it's paying for. So I thought it was an interesting look at it. The pie chart is the same information, just shown in a pie chart form. The school 42%, and so on and so forth. And you can see the sanitation pie, the slice is small at 5%, and the library smaller at 4%. So now, big question is, what would an additional mill cost? And that's the next one up there. So,
No.
oh, sorry, I'm out of order. Okay, so before we get to that one, these are recent voter-approved millages that have hit the tax bills. I gotta get to the right slide. Apologize. So recently, most recently, the Wayne Westland school bond passed. That's 4.48 mils. Livonia School District had a millage, 0.48 mils. And obviously some of these, if you live in the Livonia School District, the Wayne Westland school bond wouldn't be on your tax bill. And vice versa, if you lived in the Livonia School District, same thing. So Schoolcraft Community College, those are for Livonia or Westland residents that live in the Livonia School District. That was a Headley rollback millage at 0.49 mils. RISA enhancement, 2016 was a 2 mil approval. Wayne County Transit Authority, their millage used to be 0.59. They went up to 1 mil, so that was an increase of about 0.4 of a mil. Wayne County Community College, 2013 had a 1 mil increase. The DIA has a that was approved for 0.20. That is also on the ballot for the March 10th. That's a renewal, so that's not an increase, that's just a renewal. The William P. Faust Library back in 2011 voted in a 1 mil. And then the Detroit Zoo Logical Authority back in 2008 was a 0.1 mil. So that shows some of the more recent voter-approved millages. Now, out of all of those millages, obviously none of those are city-related millages. The closest comes is the library, but they're their own separate fund as well. So now I'll move on to the next one. So the average cost to a homeowner, and this chart shows two things. It shows at 1 mil or a 0.75 mil rate. Remember, the millage is up to 1 mil. So 1 mil would be the worst case scenario. If your taxable value on your house is $45,000, the home value is approximately double at $90,000. That would cost that particular homeowner $45 annually. Likewise, at the 0.75 mil rate, the same owner would have a $34 increase on their tax bill. And the way it's set up now, it would be on your summer tax bill. And I just gave some different examples there of different taxable values and the home values. You can see by the chart what the cost would be for those. So.
Okay. So just one comment on the last slide. These would be the numbers if the city levied 1 full mil each year. And because the language on the millage question gives the city the ability to levy up to 1 mil. As part of the budget process each year, the city council sets the city's levies. So if some of the levies are permanent numbers, and like the existing sanitation, which comes down a little bit by Headley every year, but a millage like this where you can levy up to 1 mil is something that the city council could, as part of the budget, decide what number to levy. So moving forward, depending on what we're doing in the sanitation fund, if it's with recycling, without recycling, if we're purchasing trucks or our costs go up or down or whatever, we'll have a chance on an annual basis to decide collectively with the legislative branch of government what exactly that levy would be. So with that, I got to tell you, you guys have been a great crowd. There's been a lot of information here. We've hit you with a lot of things tonight. So at this portion of the town hall meeting, what we'd like to do is ask you for your questions. Okay, I know you've got them. So what we're going to do is we actually have two folks in the microphone. We have Devin to my left and Kyle to my right. Kyle's the Parks and Rec Director. Devin's the City Controller. Because this is on television, what we're going to ask you to do is if you have a question, or actually Devin's supposed to explain this. So with this point, I'm going to kick it over to Devin. He's going to explain how the Q&A is going to work.
All right, so thank you, everybody. If you could, raise your hand, and either Kyle and I will come grab you. And if you could meet us in one of the aisles. And at this point, we'll limit it to, or we'll start off with one question per resident as an attempt to get everyone's questions. And then after that, we'll circle back for more questions, of course, if needed. And then all questions will be directed towards the mayor, and then he'll delegate them out accordingly. So, Mayor, if you don't have anything else, we'll start off.
Okay.
Okay. You can meet me in the aisle, sir.
Richard Graham from Westland, and also with Move Westland Forward. I will have a statement to read. If you want to cut me off, you can. Interesting that the city's Facebook page called this a recycling town hall. Maybe it should have been called a bankrupt sanitation department. The sanitation budget has been in a deficit starting since July 2018. That's July of 18. Our larger deficit in the budget started in July of 19 without recycling. Mayor Wild is in a deficit without recycling. So this millage increase has nothing to do with recycling. It has to do with the poor fiscal management and the sad shape of the city's finances. The city stopped recycling in February of 2019. That's when we started fake recycling. The language on the budget does not say anything about the money collected will be used for recycling. It's an option, and only after the department erases their growing deficit. Wild's team wrote the ballot language. Why was this not on the ballot in November of 18 when Mayor Wild was running for Congress? Why was it not on the ballot in November of 19 when Team Wild was working to keep control of the council and an increase could have possibly pushed then Council President Godbout out of office?
All right, guys, as mentioned, we're going to limit it to one question per.
For a low voter turnout primary election. The same night Mayor Wild asked for a millage to raise your taxes, he asked for a large pay and benefit increase.
Mr. Graham, we're gonna stick to question and answer period.
This cost us hundreds.
Is there a question on this side of the room?
All right, so all right, we're gonna go to Kyle. This is about questions. Mr. Graham, you can share your comments on your Facebook page when you get home, as I'm sure you will. So with that said.
You're being photographed from either side. So just go over to him and speak, and they'll get you on camera.
Stand up, sir.
Okay.
My name is Julie Slabaugh,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
probably the one question I have is why is sanitation and recycling in one budget? If you went back years, it was already predicted that the refuge budget was going to climb slowly, but recycling was going to go higher because of the demand and the value. So why aren't we separating it so that a millage can be assigned to sanitation or recycling, not to be included along with other things? Do you have an answer?
You want to take a crack at that, Steve, or I can? You know what, it's a good question. Just so everybody understands, if I understand your question right, is why don't we have two separate millages, one for sanitation and one for recycling? Okay, all right. Why don't you
Thank you, Mayor.
talk
So
about that, Steve?
when we talk recycling, obviously we're recycling the garbage or the refuse or the solid waste. So that's why they would be considered in the same fund, because it's really has to do, even though recycling, we don't want to call it trash, but in essence, you're recycling the trash. So it's related in that sense.
Well, that's true, but you have two different resources, two different.
So, Mayor, may I?
Sure.
Okay, so first off, we're going to try to do questions, and if we get into a back and forth with everybody who asks questions, we'll never get beyond 2 questions. And after everybody gets to ask, you're going to be able to do it again, or people will be able to stay around to do it. But one of the things in drafting the language, because I said at the outset I helped council draft the language, is you're trying to draft for a 10-year period. 10 years ago, nobody knew China would shut down and there'd be no recycling markets in China. Yes, ma'am, that's my opinion. I think maybe down at the end we feel the same way. There is also has to be a recognition that over the next 10 years, what can and can't be recycled because there's a secondary market's going to change. Plastics are going to change. So the more structured we make the language today, the less flexibility it gives you over the 10-year period. Thank you, Mayor.
My name is Mel Toxstein. I live on Chirua. I got a question. I guess it's for the mayor. I think we have a pretty good process here with the, if we made $340,000 at first, it couldn't have been that bad. But $1 million, basically going from making 340 to paying 600,000 says that that's $1 million flip, and that's pretty expensive. Has the Council of Western Wayne ever considered building their own facility or converting a facility so that we're not at the mercy of the end step?
So, Mr. Taxine, thank you. So that is definitely one of the issues that the Conference of Western Wayne is looking at. Just a couple things. So, Oakland County was very forward-thinking when they went together and they created their own recycling facility called SACRA. Unfortunately, in Wayne County, we never saw that type of leadership come out of the county creating a regional MRF, because at the end of the day, Westland, why we do 4,500, 5,000 tons. It's a lot for a city. At the end of the day, it's not that much material. So you got to have a lot of material. At this point, the county has not taken the lead on creating a recycling MRF. In the Conference of Western Wayne, if you put our 18 communities together, there's probably still not enough volume that would actually make one of these profitable. There's been some talk just recently. Our task force met with somebody from the private sector that is telling us that they're currently citing a recycling facility in Wayne County. This will be the private sector, but it'll take 2 years to get it up and running at a cost of about $35 million. So they're expensive. At the end of the day, when they open that up, they're going to want to recoup that cost. So I don't know that even when that comes online, if it's going to be cheaper than what we're seeing here today. But what's Mike had mentioned about the state of Michigan through Eagle now putting out ideas that we're going to raise recycling rates, and some folks have sent me emails. They saw where the city of Detroit got a grant for $1 million to buy recycling containers. That's great. What I'd rather see the state do is take that money and actually put it into infrastructure. We're demanding that cities have a higher recycling rate at the same time where it's financially not feasible to do it, and there's not really an end market for it. It's kind of the timing's off. You guys have all seen the commercials that the state of Michigan's running with the 2 raccoons talking about recycling. That's great. They should have been doing that 10 years ago. So at the end of the day, absolutely, it's going to take more than one community working together to really get in a position where we're not at the mercy of $130 a ton. But it is a volume-based commodity, and one of the things that's just a shocker to me is, so when this private sector company was talking to us about citing a recycling facility, I can't tell you their name because they asked us not to, but I can tell you they're a paper mill. They make paper. They're doing it because they want the cardboard. Cardboard is one of the most valuable things in single stream recycling right now, and the current market value on it is zero. So think about that. It was one of the most valuable things we put in those blue containers, and the market value is zero. So it's tough to build a business model on something that's got a zero value. So it's really tough. The Conference of Western Wayne, everybody's on board. We want to do something. One of the issues with Wayne County is not every community recycles. There's probably more that don't recycle than that do recycle. So Westland's at the table. We're at the table of the Conference of Western Wayne. I'd sit on the task force. I'm going to be talking with anybody and everybody that I can about recycling. If there's an opportunity for us to put our volume together, we certainly will. But at the end of the day, our 5,000 tons, while it seems like a lot, it's 1 million pounds a year. In the overall scheme of things, it's not a lot of volume.
Hello, Mayor.
Hi.
I just wanted to say thank you for giving such an incredible timeline of our sanitation department events. However, I'm not sure, but I did not see where we had leaf pickup mentioned in this documentation. Maybe you could touch on that a little bit, and then with asking the payers for an increase in their taxes, that would have been something that I would entertain if you would be adding that to this. Thank you.
Okay. Well, leaf pickup program that question comes up quite often, especially if you live in the north end of town where there's a lot of mature trees. This goes back a ways, and while this wasn't on that timeline, I can tell you about the time, and you guys have heard me talk about this a lot, is that with our leaf pickup program, we suspended that at the same time that we started our single stream curbside recycling program. The leaf pickup program, while it was great if you're one of those people that have to put out 40 bags of leaves, it was one of those programs that was extremely expensive. It was extremely inefficient. And with the size of our city, with 200 miles of local roads, and it was just a tough program to manage. At the time, we took a look at what our cost was there. We took a look at what our cost was to start the recycling program. I think at the time, the only elected officials that were part of that at the time was myself and Councilman Jim Godbout. At that time, we were working on this together with some of the residents that are in the room. So moving forward, could we bring back leaf pickup program? The one thing that go back to this lady's question here, this resident's question was, can't we just do a sanitation millage? Well, remember what we said, this is not recycling millage. This is not a recycling millage. This is a sanitation fund millage. So the first thing we have to do is stabilize the fund so that it's sustainable for the next 10 years. And then what we do is we're going to sit down with the city council. We're going to talk about what our priorities are. And if it's bringing back recycling, if we're re-looking at leaf pickup program, all those things that there's just a cost without moving forward on additional money for the sanitation millage, we won't be in a position to look at either one of those programs. But I probably get more calls on the leaf pickup program at that time of the year than anything else. I know it's popular for those folks that want it. It is expensive and it is inefficient. So this guy right here knows all about it because he's the guy that had to do it for all those years. But so that's something that if this moves forward, we can take a look at it. I don't want to promise it to you because it's a tough program to administer. Cities that still do it will tell you that in the state of Michigan, you never know what the weather's going to be like. And if your leaves are out in the street and you get snowed or it gets frozen, it creates a lot of problems, especially if you get rain afterwards. But it's something that I guarantee every one of our city council members are here will be nodding their head. They get a lot of calls on it too.
Hi, Denise Sedman. Excuse me, I have a two-part question. Number one, I wanted to know on the recycling, what was the spoil rate? Because the mayor had indicated that cardboard is a good commodity for paper making, but we recycle glass and the glass gets stuck in the cardboard. So the one question would be the spoil rate, either at the Marquette Center or from our own recycling. And then the second question is, how long are we going to continue fake recycling?
All right, so I'm going to ask you guys if you can talk about the spoil rate.
Yeah, and it's really like at the end of the line, like at the recycling center, the Re-Community site down in New Boston. Traditionally, they were always in that 10% range. And then as the markets got tighter and tighter as they ship different commodities out, like say, for example, cardboard, they send out a truckload of baled cardboard out. It used to always be, hey, 10% residual at the end of the line of contaminated material, the items that would go to the landfill. It's more than doubled that now. So like they're running like in the 20s. And depending on what the market is, we were getting phone calls in regard, hey, can you help us move 3 through 7s? We're having a hard time even shipping it to a recycling plant. So the the plastics number 3 through 7 were really hard to move. So right now I'd say at that 20% number, but I can make a phone call and get the exact number and have that posted, just so we have a real number out there. But traditionally it was like in the 10s, but I know, I've just heard it's over double that now. And the other portion, I think you should answer.
So I'm going to tackle fake recycling. So, but I want us to, it goes into your first question about the spoil rate. So if we get financially in a position where we can get back in recycling, in the beginning period of that, there's going to be an education portion because we're going to have to educate people. We're already starting to hear that glass may not be accepted at the curb, certain plastics may not, and that's going to depend on what the market is at the time. But a big part of it is going to be about cleaning up what we already have. And while we had a pretty clean mix before compared to some other cities, we've learned now with the Chinese tightening up their criteria is that our mix didn't meet that criteria. So we're going to have to clean it up. So that gets your point about fake recycling. And at any time, I think I've never tried to give the impression that the stuff you put in your blue can was being recycled. I tried to be 100% transparent that it was going to a landfill. I sent everybody that's part of that gets a pickup got a letter from me. We've talked about it in a lot of different ways. It's on the city's website when you look it up. We've been totally transparent on that. The reason.
Most people, they're not using it.
All right. Okay.
Ma'am,
all right.
You don't have a microphone. They can't hear you back there.
All right. The reason that we've asked you to continue separating it was to protect the behavior. Was that our biggest fear, and I'll be honest with you, I thought that we'd have a solution by now. It's really tough because we don't have a lot of options at the same time. We got our hands tied behind our back up financially, so we were hoping that there would be a short-term solution. We were hoping that we could get them back to the $18 a ton, but that's not going to happen. So we were trying to protect the behavior. We know that once we tell people just turn them both into garbage cans, some people are already doing it. We're asking folks not to. If you do that, then that's understandable, and that's why the education piece is going to be a big part of this moving forward. But at the end of the day, if we don't move forward with this millage, I don't think that we're going to be financially in a position under the current market rates to recycle. So at that point, we'll have to make the decision, and I'll work with the city council on this, is if we turn those blue containers into garbage cans. I don't want to do that because I do think as a community that we want to do this, and I think that collectively we're going to come up with a way to do it. So you can call it fake recycling, and it might feel that way, but at the end of the day, that's the reason that we're continuing to do it, is to protect the behavior.
I saw someone in blue with their hand up.
Ma'am, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, Mr. Asper.
Thanks. William Astor. So I had about a three-part
statement, I guess. I do real estate, and I know that real estate prices are going down slowly. In your PowerPoint, it said 1.5% growth every year for 10 years. I don't think those numbers are accurate. Those numbers are not accurate. The end figures are not accurate. That was my first part. The second, if I'm sure everyone knows, garbage pickup comes every week. Fake recycling comes every other week. I did FOIA for this. Westland still pays $90,000 every month for each wave. So Westland pays $90,000 for 4 waves of garbage every month. They pay the same amount for 2 waves of recycling every month. That'd be to you, Mr. Rutherford? Ruthenberg. Why the difference in that? The last part. So at the millage, if you look at other cities that have high millage rates, the property prices tend to go down. Other cities, Inkster, River Rouge, Ecorse, Detroit, they have lower property values. If you have lower property values, your SCB is going to be lower. And that's definitely going to drastically lower the amount of taxes you bring in. So I guess what's your answer to that? Mr. Rutherford, if you could answer that first one.
So on the real estate thing is the history, Westland's real estate market speaks for itself. Our rates have been going up, so, and that's the market's there to prove that. You can look on Zillow, 48185 or 48186, and you can take a look and see what the city's history is on property values. And then Paul can explain at the end of the day why we're picking stuff up with 2 different trucks, what the cost to the city is, why we're doing it. Does it make sense to do it? Should we stop doing it? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Paul.
Yeah, and was a little bit confused with your question as far as the 2-part $90,000 question. The fact is that every other week, Westland pays Midwestern Sanitation $89,900. It's for a complete product of our trucks working, our payment, what we do. There isn't a distinction between recycling for 2 weeks and trash for 2 weeks, if that's okay. But again, the first thing is when we talk about quote unquote fake recycling, it kind of makes me recoil a little bit personally. But the fact is that just because I believe it's important, okay, for the world, that's it, okay. But when we get into the trash bins, the blue recycling bins and the brown trash bins, okay, what we have to remember is that it's all volume that comes out of your home, okay? So in other words, to realize a savings, okay, we would have to take all of those blue cans that we currently collect every day and not have anything in them because it's a volume-based thing. I'm sorry.
That wasn't really my
Yeah, and I'm sorry. I was a little confused on your question, sir.
My question or my statement was that garbage pickup comes weekly.
Yes.
Recycle trucks come, recycle trucks come bi-weekly.
Yes.
So I pulled FOIA on this, that's how I know the amounts. So Westland pays the city of Westland pays you almost $90,000 a month for weekly trash pickup. That's 4 times a month.
Okay.
Westland also pays you approximately the same amount, $90,000 a month for 2 waves, the bi-weekly recycle pickup. Why the difference?
Well, in all honesty, when you're talking about those $90,000 a month payments, you've also excluded the fact that we pick up all compostables as well. That's part of our fee. The question is, if we're not recycling, sir, if I get this right, if recycling is actually not going to the recycling MRF, well, how come we're still charging for that? Is that, I'm trying to.
Let's let Steve take a crack at it.
I'm sorry, Jim.
Why is 4 costing the same as 2? Correct. 4 waves of trucks every month.
All right.
2 waves of trucks. It's
I'm
costing the same thing.
going to have Steve talk about how we make the payments.
Thanks, Mayor. So I think to clarify, the $90,000 payment every other week, That's for the weekly pickup and the recycling pickup. Yes.
I pulled Boyd on this.
I pay the bills. Sorry. I know. Well, I'm just trying to clarify it. I don't know, I didn't see your FOIA request, I apologize, but I know we pay twice a month, $90,000, and that includes everything he does. Compost, recycling. It's not $90,000 just for pickup and then $90,000 for recycling. The $90,000 is all inclusive of everything he does. So that includes the compost, that includes the recycling, that includes the solid waste, that includes the bulk pickup. That's everything.
He just said it costs more though for compost.
Well, it costs, okay, it costs the same to pick it up. Where we deliver it, there's a separate cost of where we deliver it. Yes, it's extra cost, but we don't pay him that. So anyways, I don't know if that helps, but.
Okay.
Next question, I guess.
We have any other questions?
Any other questions? Coming right to you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, resident of Westland. Just curious, so to clarify, the recycling is not necessarily going to be guaranteed with this millage. That's really my important question.
Could you put the ballot language
I
back
read the
up?
ballot.
So, and the ballot, but others maybe haven't. And let me be clear about, because I thought I was clear about what the ballot language does say. It's for the purpose of funding recycling and garbage services, including but not limited to recycling, bulk pickup, disposal, yard waste collection, compost.
Jim, I think that is a great question.
I just want to know.
All right, and we're on TV, so this is recorded, so what I say next will be living infamy. So we've explained that the current rate of recycling, the 130, the most recent proposal that Steve has got is $130 a ton, roughly 5,000 tons. The number came out to 585,000. Okay. We know that if the millage does not pass financially, we will not be in a position to do that. If the millage does pass, my intent next is to bring forward a contract to the city council to bring back recycling. The millage request is up to 1 mil. We know that if a full mill brings in $1.75 million, once we plug that into those graphs, the city will be in a position to bring back recycling. What my plan would be to bring back some sort of short-term recycling contract so that we could keep an eye on the future, talk with these other cities that are already doing bigger consolidations, so that the city does have the ability to potentially enter into another agreement if we can save money. But you hear it, I'm on TV, I'm saying this, the city council members are over here, so pin them in the hallway when you leave. My intent is if this passes, is I'm gonna bring a contract from the city council to bring back recycling.
Back in 2010 is when the recycle started the first time, correct? Was it 2009, 10? Is that when it?
2008, I believe.
2008. Now, back then, didn't we also pay out of our taxes for that?
No, that came under the existing sanitation millage.
So it didn't come out of our taxes?
Well, it did. If you pay the original sanitation millage, that's the fund it came out of to do recycling.
So are we currently paying right now?
You're currently paying a sanitation millage.
Okay, thank you.
But just I kind of see where you're going. You're thinking, like, we were paying for recycling and now we're not recycling, but we're still paying.
Every 10 years, is this going to happen again? To where you're going to come back and ask the residents for more money every 9 or 10 years?
That's going to be based, well, that's going to be based on what the cost is. So if you use the theory that we were paying in 2008, and we were getting recycling. Here we are in 2020. We're still paying, we're not getting it. The reason is because the cost to do so has changed. And that sanitation millage, the existing millage, which started off as 3.3 mils back in 1968, because of Headley is down to 2.4 mils, the revenue that it generates does not cover the cost of doing it. So I just want you to say is that the reason is because the cost changed. The revenues that it generates does not cover the cost.
Hi, I just have a quick question. Let's say this millage does not pass, then what is your plan?
Well, that's a great question too. So, well, we're going to be sitting down with the city council. I have to have a balanced budget to city council by April 1st of this year per the city charter. So by my April, I know you're saying you didn't answer my question yet, but by April 1st, we'll know if the millage passes. So if it doesn't pass during the budget sessions, we'll be talking about where do we go from here.
And then you'll have 2 more meetings to try to get residents to vote again.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Like, you'll bring this 2 more elections, you'll have this brought up again
Well,
to try to get this to pass. I'm just saying, if it doesn't pass, where do you plan on making cuts? Because we know you want to bring this back. We also know the city, it doesn't have money, so they're
Well,
relying on the residents to try to form something to, you know what I mean? To act like it might be for sanitation and recycling, but really it's probably going to be spread out for a lot of things.
no, it's only going to be used for the things that were spelled out in that millage. All that falls under our sanitation. So if the millage doesn't pass, is there a plan to come back with this again? When we asked the city council to put this on a ballot, the city council had to vote on that. So if there was an effort to come back for another bite at the apple, so to say, that would all have to go back through the city council, and there's a process to do that. So if the millage doesn't pass, we're going to have to take a good hard look at what we're doing under the sanitation millage, and that's picking up our trash, which we know is imperative, picking up our compost, picking up bulk pickup. One of the reasons that we had downsized our bulk pickup before and we went to the drop-off days was because that was a cut. That was because we were trying to live within the means of that budget. So if the millage doesn't pass, we're going to have to take a look at our cost. We have a contract with Midwest through 2024. We have a contract through CWCSA, which is our waste management contract. Those costs are, we know what those costs are going to be. And we'll just have to take a look and see what our costs are and work together with the city council and see what we can do. We've been creative. I mean, we've kept this thing going since 1968. And since I've been mayor, I haven't come back and asked our residents to pass millages. We've worked within our means. The library millage was brought forward by the library board, and I supported it at the time. But at the end of the day, we've lived within our means, and we'll try to do that, but we just need to be honest with people is that if our goal is to bring back recycling under the current sanitation millage, that's just not feasible. And we've got to be clear about that. The most important thing is picking up the trash, and that's what we're going to make sure that we do that, so that's not affected. So,
Mayor?
Hi, my name is Johanna Gaida. I think I've been a resident in Westland for 49 years. And I think in the consensus of all of this is people are afraid, where a lot of us are on fixed income. That don't go up, taxes are going up. We can't afford it. A lot of people are moving out because they can't afford it. We're just worried about the truth. Is this going to go for that? The next thing you ask from us, is it going to go for that? Is somebody pocketing the money? Is somebody getting? Is there something underhanded? We don't trust anybody nowadays. And it's very, very hard, especially for us senior citizens, to vote for more taxes. Just a statement.
all right. Right here, done.
Jim Godfrey, I have a question for you on it. It says sanitation department budget current. As you go out, the gap is 1 million. So why are we asking for $1,750,000?
Thanks for the question. So the $1,750,000, remember the millage is up to 1 mil. So as the mayor had said, during the budget process, that exact millage rate will be determined then. We'll present it to council. Council will vote on it in June. So the 1 mil would bring in $1.75 million. But that doesn't mean we're going to levy the 1 mil. It's just up to 1 mil. Because, and that's why I gave the different examples of what it would cost for 1 mil and then 0.75 mils.
I would feel a whole lot better if it's 0.6 or 0.5 than somebody putting out 1 million or 1 mil. Because it always goes into effect. And people pay it.
And like I said, and every year during the budget process, it'll be determined. And we don't know. I know what you're saying, but. Okay.
Take it all.
Okay. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But every year as we go through the budget, things may change. We may not need that full mill. We may need 0.6.
I hear you.
But
I hear you loud and clear. But that isn't the way anything happens. In the county, you pass you get 2 mills.
Okay.
For school. Everything is exactly what you pass.
Yeah. Well, I can understand you saying that, and Mr. Godfrey, I appreciate, this is a gentleman that he watches the numbers, he contacts us all the time, contacts Steve Smith all the time, and I know that you read the budget, and I appreciate that. We're gonna, on an annual basis, take a look at this. The reason why it's tough on something like this to say, let's ask for 0.6 or 0.7 is because when Steve went through those numbers, a lot of those are based on assumptions. Over the next 10 years, we're gonna have an expiring contract with Midwest. We don't know what our landfill costs are gonna be beyond that. We have to work with the city council on how we're gonna handle trucks in the future. So there's a lot of variables. So that's why we felt comfortable with asking for up to 1 mil. And I can tell you that I get it. I understand this is a period of time right now where the public's trust in government's probably at an all-time low. And that starts at the federal level and the state level. Statistics show that the people trust their local government more than those other 2 branches. So I'd ask you to stay active. You've been active. You've got my ear, you've got Steve's ear. I know you've got several of the council people's ear. So stay honest during the budget process and make sure that we're not asking for any more money than we need to.
Mayor, I got one over here.
Oh. Okay.
Okay. I'd like to share with you Department of Energy has a $100 million to spend to develop new technology. And so I would like to suggest the Westland is taking a leadership, but still we have to look at what's going to happen as new technology evolves. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Well, it's almost 8 o'clock, so when we were planning this out, we were thinking that about 2 hours, 6 to 8. So we appreciate everybody coming in. Hopefully we answered as many questions as you could. Everybody that's up here is going to stay around for a little bit and try to answer some questions. I know a lot of people feel a little more comfortable asking questions one-on-one, not necessarily with the TV cameras rolling. So All the information that we've had here tonight, we're going to try to get it on the City of Westland's website. If you go to the front page, you can click on, there's a bullet, I don't know exactly what it says, if it's the sanitation millage or sanitation fund. You can click on there and we'll continue to add information moving forward. And at the end of the day, we appreciate everybody's attention. This has been a lot to go through, and I understand it's always tough asking residents to consider digging in their pockets. That's not an easy ask. So hopefully we're able to answer some questions. Thanks for everybody for being part of the panel here tonight. Thank you.